English is something that defines the earliest period of one's education and growth. It is a time of learning to read, write, and speak, and overall communicate effectively with others. It is something that is not often looked back upon by most people, but when it is looked back upon, it's pretty astounding to see where you started from and where you've come. These are my earliest memories of learning to read, write, and speak. I recall bits and pieces of learning to read in elementary school. I remember putting words together to form sentences, even putting sounds together to form words. However, my primary memory of learning to read comes from reading with my mother at night, as she would go through these same few books every night as they were my favorite. They were usually some Dr. Seuss book or some simple book of that nature, and she would read them aloud to me, and I would follow along. I would try to pinpoint which word she was saying. I recall distinctly. And it got to the point where I was starting to pick up words and I would start stumbling through sentences. I would stutter on words and she would help me through them. And then it got to the point where I was reading the same sentences I had heard countless times and I would read them back to her. And those sentences then turned into paragraphs of other books, and those paragraphs then linked up to form chapters, and I was began reading chapter books. And it got to the point late in elementary school, early in middle school, where I enjoyed reading full-length novels, and I was able to read informative texts and able to decipher the proper information I needed from them. But it is interesting to look back and see the disparity between the place that I started from and the place that I am now. It is always leaving me with a sense of awe, the amount of progress I have made into understanding this complex language. Learning to write was a task I distinctly remember liking a lot less than learning to read. My most distinct memory after learning to write a couple of simple sentences and words in first grade was writing my first paragraph in second grade. Now, the word paragraph to a room full of second graders is probably the most terrifying word we had ever heard. And we were writing about rainforest animals. I remember being assigned the jaguar. And being the second grade calligraphers that we were given paper that guided the proportionality of our letters so that our lowercase letters would be assuredly lowercase and the uppercase letters would distinguish themselves. And to that extent, I wrote a page long paragraph. Now, as I continued to write paragraphs throughout my elementary school and middle school career, I began to realize rather quickly that they are not page-long endeavors, but rather short, simple pieces of writing. However, today, now that they require only a couple minutes of work, I still feel this nagging in the back of my mind every time I hear to write a paragraph. There's a small connotation that just doesn't quite fit in the back of my head that makes me feel like I have to do a ton of work, even though I know I actually don't have to. Learning to speak English is a task that is defined by things both inside of school and outside of school. My earliest memory of learning to speak English in school comes from a first grade exercise called phonics. Phonics was essentially flashcards that contained a set of letters that made a certain sound and were accompanied by an image that displayed that particular sound. For example, TION makes the shun sound, and that was followed by a picture of lotion. My first grade teacher I remember had a thick southern accent, and she always had some kind of rhyme or tune to follow each one so that we would remember them more easily. However, there is more to English than just putting sounds into words and words into sentences. There is the whole use of phrases and sense of humor as there is with any language. And to that extent, I picked most of this up from my mom. She had a very dry and sarcastic sense of humor that I like to think I picked up on pretty quickly. However, another influence I had on the way I spoke English was my friends. My friends used a lot of phrases that I picked up. I sort of enjoyed their sense of humor. And to this day, I still use phrases that became sort of inside jokes to us, even if I'm not talking to one of them. It is very interesting to notice how particular developments, both inside and outside of school, shape the character of an individual's English.